This is Jolanda van Haal from Nutrition Insights, and today I'm going to be talking about the food as management movement and the role of medically tailored meals within that, with Sue Daugherty, who is the CEO of MANNA, which is a US company that has been providing these types of meals since 1990. So I'm really curious if you can talk a bit about how the landscape of food as medicine has evolved over the decades, and specifically the role that MANNA has played in that shift.
Sure. So MANNA, we started as an organization in 1990. So we are celebrating our 35th year, and we've certainly been in the space of food as medicine throughout those decades, but it certainly has shifted over the years. So we were founded as an HIV/AIDS organization, and so we were providing meals, mainly in the 90s, more as comfort, right, and helping people to die at a time when people were alone and often, family members, were afraid to support other family members. So I joined MANNA in 1999 as a registered dietitian nutritionist. And it was a really interesting time during that landscape because once medications became available, right, we saw a big shift. I tell the story all the time, and I remember it like it was yesterday, in that I was providing nutrition counseling to an individual, and they had a triglyceride level of over like 800, which is crazy high, right? Like normal is under 150. And I truly thought like it was a mistake. I thought the lab had messed up. And I called the infectious disease doctor and said, what's going on? And he's explained to me that this was a side effect from the HIV/AIDS medications. And so it was really the first time for me that I saw this like metabolic disorder that was happening. And at the same time, I remember seeing the gooey mac and cheese being cooked in the MANNA kitchen going out, and really had this thought like, we need to change. And so that's when we kind of say the science was born here at MANNA. And we really shifted our focus from helping people die to helping people live. And so, we knew that cholesterol was an issue. We knew that we needed to have healthy fats. And really, that's when we revamped the entire menu cycle to make sure that we were providing the right nutrition to help people win their fight. And then we expanded beyond HIV and AIDS. Today, we're an organization that I think last year we touched over 80 different illnesses. And so our clients that we're serving are really the sickest of the sick, right? They're the 5% that's costing the healthcare system 50% of the cost. And often our clients are alone, right? We don't have a financial criteria, but the reality is those that we serve are a significant amount of people are food insecure and don't have access to healthy food. And so here at MANNA, we really, we do believe in food as medicine. And as a dietitian, I would be so frustrated when I worked in the healthcare system and people would get discharged and they would be told, okay, here's your medications. We called all your medications into the pharmacy. You're going to go here for your physical therapy, your occupational therapy, or your radiation or your chemo. And then very often there's this complex diet that is prescribed, and not like, oh, eat better. No, it's more like have a 4-gram phosphorus, 4-gram potassium, 2-gram sodium, 2000 cc fluid restricted diet. And it's like, what are people supposed to do with that, right? I'm a dietitian. I'm fortunate that I have a support system. I have money in my pocket. That would be really hard for me to follow today. And so that's really what we see at MANNA, is that we are the pharmacy for your prescription diet. We have 12 different diet modifications. And often clients come to us and they're maybe coming to us because they're newly diagnosed with cancer, but they may also have diabetes and high blood pressure. And so we make sure that we're providing the right nutrition to meet all their illnesses.
Really interesting. And I'm curious if you can dive a little bit more into how MANNA ensures that all the meals that you're providing are medically tailored, but also that they support specific clinical outcomes as you were describing.
Sure. So it's interesting. You were asking earlier about the landscape, right? And so, for 35 years, we've been kind of screaming at the top of the mountain, like, hey, this is really, really important. And I would say for probably about 32 of those years, us and we are part of the Food as Medicine Coalition, right? So there's a national organization. So there's, organizations across the country that make up this coalition. And we all came out of the HIV/AIDS crisis, and we've all expanded to now serve all illnesses. But we've been doing this work for a long time. And I would say the White House hosted a conference a few years ago that kind of uplifted food as medicine. And because insurance now, because of research, right, that MANNA published, we were the first organization in the country that published research in 2013 that showed not only do clients have better health outcomes, they have significant reduction in healthcare cost, right? And so that was really the tool that armed us to partner with mostly Medicaid providers here across the country, where for a small portion, right, very tightly controlled population, they will treat a prescribed diet just like they would treat a prescribed medication, and they're reimbursing for that. But that's still very tightly controlled. But I hate to say this, right? But now that there's some money in the space, right, there's much more competition. And there's a lot of for-profit entities popping up. And there's a lot of folks claiming that they're doing food as medicine, or that they're doing medically tailored meals. But there's really no standard yet set nationally to define what that is. And so I'm proud to be part of the FIMIC coalition, where with the organization that launched the first accredited program model, that if you receive this accreditation, it holds you to a set of standards that you're providing and practicing. And so MANNA was the first organization in Pennsylvania to receive that accreditation. And so we at least are, if we say that we're providing X meal, we know that we've been, we've had site visits, we were audited, our nutrient analysis goes through an extensive, review. So the quality of product that we have to use, no preservatives, things like that. And so it's confusing, I think, for people right now. I think there's a lot of people in this space being like, oh yeah, we're food as medicine, or we're medically tailored meals, and they're not. And so that also can be concerning if people think they're getting something that they're not getting.
Yeah, and I mean, this accreditation program that you just mentioned, I'm really curious if you can dive a bit into what does that mean in practice for companies that want to have this accreditation from the Food as Medicine Coalition. And you also already touched a bit on how that set you apart from other companies, but please feel free to expand a bit more on that.
Yeah, so right now for the accreditation, it is only at this point, but that's being evaluated. It's only eligible for nonprofit organizations. And so to receive the accreditation, you have to have registered dietitians on staff, working with chefs that are ServSafe certified, right? So there's certain standards that your kitchen has to be upheld to. Again, certain, ingredients that you have to use, and, no preservatives, there has to be, again, if you're saying you're providing like a 4-gram potassium, that's all. There has to be a nutrient analysis that goes along with each recipe to show that you're meeting the standards and the guidelines that are associated with the different diets that you're providing. We're a volunteer-driven organization, right? And that's a key component, I think, for our program. We kind of think that, doesn't necessarily tie to the accreditation, but we do think there's something about folks coming in and volunteering, giving their time, that means something, right? We hear from our clients all the time. The food is great, but the love is better. And I just think of myself, right? There's been times in my life that, I may be sick and not feel well. And if I'm fortunate enough to have someone that takes time to prepare something for me, even though in my head, I'm like, I really don't want to eat this, but you almost feel like, oh, you need to do that. And we think that there is some of that with our clients. But our dietitians, all organizations have to have dietitians that are upholding the American Dietetic Association criteria for providing counseling and education, follow up. We provide cooking classes. So there's a whole, and you can go on FIMIC's website and see it's a very, very detailed criteria that you need to meet to receive the accreditation.
Awesome, really interesting. Another topic, I mean, we talked about medically tailored meals a bit already, but one thing that's almost every nutrition interview we talk about is these GLP-1 drugs that are coming up and are being really, really popular in terms of weight management, metabolic health management. I'm really curious, where do you see medically tailored meals fitting into that conversation specifically?
I think that is such an important topic right now. I think, I'll be honest with you. I mean, we could talk forever, right, about how these drugs have kind of exploded and the initial intent in regards to diabetes and so forth. But as a dietitian, it's kind of blown my mind a little bit that I kind of think about um, weight loss surgery, right? And so if someone, yeah, and I haven't been practicing as a dietitian in a while, so it may have changed slightly at this point, but back when I was practicing, right, if you were someone who you were going to be considered for weight loss surgery, there was a whole set of stuff that had to happen before you got to that surgery, right? Like you had to see a dietitian, you had to meet with a counselor, you had to demonstrate that diet, failed. I mean, there was a whole bunch of stuff that had to happen before you got to that point. And I think that's a little bit of the problem, specifically in regards to weight loss, right? It's like people just being put on this medication. There's a lot of folks are not changing their diet, right? So they're losing weight, but they're still not eating in a healthy fashion. And then folks are, there's some data coming out now with like malnutrition, right, associated with it because people aren't eating well. And so they're losing all this weight, but they're losing muscle with that. And so it just kind of fascinates me that there's not this intervention. And I think now, because of honestly costs and how it has exploded, I think that that's being reevaluated. And I think medically tailored meals can play a huge part in that, right? And I feel like we always jump, right, to like the most least efficient or cost, like why we don't jump to, hey, let's provide you with a healthy diet that's carbohydrate controlled or whatever, sodium controlled, whatever, congestive heart failure, right? And let's see what happens. And the other thing is also what happens when people come off of the medication. So I think that that is being reevaluated, and I think medically tailored meals has a big role. I think, what I feel like I battle constantly when I'm advocating for policy change is that people just can't wrap their brains around the fact that when we talk about medically tailored meals, we're not talking about food. We are actually talking about a treatment, a prescribed intervention. And so people get like, which again, we could talk about this all day, right? People get like, oh, food as an entitlement, which one, I think food should be an entitlement, but I have to always back up and be like, I'm not talking to you about food. I'm talking to you. Like these diets have been prescribed forever. I've like tried to do the history of like when was the first like prescribed diet written, right? But like in healthcare, people get prescribed diets all the time. And here in the United States, when you get admitted to the hospital, you can't receive food until a diet order is put in for you, right? Like it's that's like how, but people don't think about how they're going to access it. And so I think medically tailored meals has a huge component in at least making sure that people learn how to eat a balanced diet. And then if that fails, okay, then like move to the medication. Or when you come off, make sure that you're still giving people a balanced diet. But it concerns me. I mean, I don't know how it is over there, but here, I mean, I feel like everybody and their mother is on these drugs, and it just really, really does concern me what happens when people come off these drugs and what's going to happen, God forbid, while on the drug if you get sick and you're malnourished because you've been losing weight but not doing it in the healthiest way, and now you have to go battle chemotherapy or radiation. I think there's going to be a lot of consequence.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that's something that we're seeing here as well. It's that there's this surge of interest, but also pushback on not just doing the drugs, but doing a whole program around it, so that you're having that good quality nutrition. I think that's something that we see here a lot for sure. Yeah, I think that's
Yeah.
a really useful direction. And I'm also curious, in terms of scaling medically tailored meals, do you see any particular challenges or opportunity to achieve that?
So definitely I think through the Food is Medicine Coalition, we recognize that there's, MANNA-like agencies, but not enough of us, right? And so they have an accelerator program that one of our sister organizations out of Boston we actually just accepted our first international program out of Australia. So for folks that are interested in learning our model, right, and doing medically tailored meals, and right, we want this to be available, all across the country. And I think it's really important, to recognize that here in Pennsylvania or Philadelphia, and maybe what we're serving our community isn't what folks in Texas would be. Like I think it's really important to recognize the local communities that we're in. And so, over the years, MANNA, our board, or you know, they've at times been like, oh, like we should just put MANNAs all across the country. And it's like, no, like that, like we are MANNA because we've been in our community for 35 years and we have the trust of our community and the volunteers, which I think resonates then with the clients that we're serving. And so I think the accelerator program is a great opportunity for folks that want to learn the model. But on a scale also, I mean, we do have the ability to ship our meals. So we have, as part of MANNA, we have a division of MANNA called the MANNA Institute, which is a research and evaluation arm. Because again, you know, when I'm kind of pounding the streets and being like, hey, is not everyone who gets prescribed a diet, why is not that being covered, right? And we need more data. I would argue there's plenty of data, right, that shows you're going to save the federal government significant dollars and you're going to have better health outcomes. But we launched the MANNA Institute, and it's just fascinating to me that the data continues to show, right, that folks, one, like that's a big component also, right? Like they have to like want to eat the meals. But they have very specific requests or needs that would be different, right, across the country. And so the accelerator really is this amazing program. I believe it's like a 9-month program, and folks come in. We just had the organization from Australia come visit us a couple weeks ago and can really then hopefully build more models like MANNA, but local to the communities that they serve.
Awesome. And just to round off this interview, if we look, I'm curious what your hopes are for the food as medicine movement, and how organizations like MANNA can help continue that change.
So certainly our current administration here in the United States is potentially, you know, presenting some challenges, right? And so I really do hope that since there is so much momentum in this space, and I think that FMIC has always been, the Food as Medicine Coalition has been the leader in this space. And I'm hopeful that the federal government will look at that and look at these standards and really hold them to the highest standards and hold others to that same level of accountability. And really, my ultimate hope, right, and my ultimate goal that I come here every day and fight for is that someday, right, medically tailored meals will be a mandated covered expense, right? Like just like you get prescribed your medication, if you get prescribed a diet, that should be accessible, and that should be accessible for all. And it's a win-win, right? Again, it's one of those things, like sometimes you see like a headline, like eating fruits and vegetables, you know, is good for you. And it's like, we have to do research, right? Well, we actually have research. We have a lot of data that shows this is an outcome that is a win-win for everyone, and it should be accessible and covered for all.